Well, hello, Arizona and Colorado, and anybody else listening on the internet. This is the Patriot Radio News Hour. I am Jason, the host this week, as the majority owner of Patriot Trading Group. Joe Jaquin is on a vacation, seeing family, and I'll be holding down the fort. I've got this show that I'm playing. It's Stephen Mitford Goodson, A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind. I'm going to continue to play that today and through the week. I come in with some gold and silver special yesterday, and sometimes it's tough to come up with a good gold and silver special as far as pricey, because you go to get the special, and then suddenly gold and silver just keeps going up right when you get on the air. That happened yesterday. So for those that ordered yesterday, that was good of you. Silver kind of stayed where it was, so I'm going to be doing the same silver special. But then right when we're coming on the air, suddenly silver's pushing higher. It's up 50 cents now, whereas it was sitting around $31. I was going to keep the Silver Eagle special, which I think a lot of you guys missed on yesterday. Highly suggest. But the $20 gold pieces yesterday at $25.95, that's gone off the table. I don't have that for a special today. You can always go to allamericangold.com and shop any of the coins we got. The prices keep pushing, and gold keeps hitting record highs this week. Another record high. It closed above $2,400 on Thursday, closed above $2,400 on Friday, pushed to an all-time record high again on Monday, going up a little bit. The overnights are kind of playing with the number. It kind of goes down in the overnights when our market's closed, and then comes out firing away again when our market's open. It's up $30 a day. It's at another all-time record high at the moment, $2,452. So the gold special I have prepared, the silver special, I'm gonna hold on to it, but quite literally, if this thing were to go explode during the hour, I would suggest you buy these and buy these specials up quick, because gold is liking this place it's at in the 2,400. Suddenly, it's just 4 days above that level. I think it will close above 2,400 again for the fourth day. Record highs look like they're coming, and before you know it, on Friday it could be above $2,500 an ounce. So, really quick with these specials before I get into the content. A roll of Silver Eagles. I've kept the price from yesterday. That will not be the price tomorrow if the movement continues to move in the direction it looks. $760 a roll. That's a really good price on Silver Eagles. I'm going to sell 1/10 ounce gold Eagles, fractional gold for you guys that can't buy the full ounce. Some of you guys got those yesterday. Well, for you guys that like to get a little gold, to add to your silver. $300 for a 1/10 ounce gold Eagle. I wanted to cut the price even lower, but I just this is a good price. The website price at allamericangold.com is $305 each. So if you wanted to buy a whole roll, for example, of 10th ounce gold Eagles, that'd be $15,000. Not a bad price for 5 ounces of gold in this kind of a small fractional form that you can really break down and barter and all that stuff, right? All the ways. I'm seeing more and more people talking about actually physically using gold and silver in their transactions. With hey, I got the guy doing the landscaping for me, and he took a couple of 10,000 gold Eagles to do the work. Got a guy taking silver from me, and I think you're going to start seeing more and more people starting to transact in gold and silver as things get a little weirder and weirder. In the news cycle and in the economics, just the economics being as corrupt and bad as it is. The number to call to buy gold and silver from the Patriot Trading Group, that number is 800-951-0592. That number again is 800-951-0592. I suggest jumping on gold and silver this week, and the earlier the better, because I was going to sell $20 Liberties again today, and it's just the price is just pushing. And I think the fractional, it's a good, give you guys a chance to get the fractional gold today. So 1/10 ounce gold Eagles, $300. One full roll, 20 ounces, American Silver Eagles, $760. So I'm going to play a couple of minutes. We're going to hit this first break, but I'm in part two of the A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind. This was written by Stephen Mitford Goodson, who died under slightly suspicious circumstances in 2018. But this was narrated by somebody that's anonymous. He just thought that, man, people really need to hear this. And you can find this on YouTube, although there's several YouTube sites where they're being taken out. I haven't looked on Rumble or BitChute, but I'll bet it's there as well. But let's get a few minutes. Let me get a minute of this in, and then we'll hit the break, and I'll just bring it in for the second segment. And it's a little bit dry, the narration, but it is packed with information. If you want to know who they are, when we talk about they, well, this goes all the way back to early history, and as by the end of the week, you'll be hearing us moving it up to modern day. So here we go.
Sabbath breakers. In 1640, one of the leaders of the clandestine Jewish community, Fernandez Carvajal, a merchant and spy, who was also known as the Great Jew, organized an armed militia of about 10,000 operatives who were used to intimidate the people of London and sow confusion. Large numbers of pamphlets and leaflets were also distributed. Civil war soon followed between the Royalists, Anglicans, and the Roundheads, Puritans, and lasted from 1642 to 1648. The Roundheads, with their New Model Army, were victorious, and an estimated 190,000 persons, or 3.8% of the population, died. The leader of the Roundheads was Oliver Cromwell, 1599 to 1658, whose New Model Army was not only outfitted and provisioned by the chief contractor and professional agitator Fernandez Carvajal, but also bankrolled by Jewish moneylenders in Amsterdam. The leader of the Dutch Jews, Manasseh ben Israel, sent begging petitions to Cromwell asking that the Jews be allowed to immigrate to England in return for the financial favors, which he has.
Stay tuned. We'll be right back. We'll play more of this. It's a history of central banking and the enslavement of mankind. Keep on listening. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Patriot Radio News Hour. So let's continue on.
So generously arranged. The regicide of King Charles I. The treachery to which Cromwell descended is revealed in correspondence between himself and the Synagogue of Molheim, Germany. 16th of June, 1647. From O.C. Oliver Cromwell to Ebenezer Pratt. In return for financial support, Will advocate admission of Jews to England. This, however, impossible while Charles living. Charles cannot be executed without trial, adequate grounds for which do not at present exist. Therefore, advised that Charles be assassinated, but will have nothing to do with arrangements for procuring an assassin, though willing to help in his escape. In reply was dispatched the following: 12th of July, 1647. To O.C. from Ebenezer Pratt. Will grant financial aid as soon as Charles removed and Jews admitted. Assassination too dangerous. Charles will be given an opportunity to escape. His recapture will make trial and execution possible. The support will be liberal, but useless to discuss terms until trial commences. King Charles was staying as a virtual prisoner in Holmby House, Northamptonshire. On the 4th of June, 1647, 500 revolutionaries seized the king, but then allowed him to escape to the Isle of Wight, where he was subsequently arrested. On the 5th of September, 1648, the House of Commons decided that the king's concessions were satisfactory to a settlement. Cromwell then purged the House of Commons with the assistance of Colonel Pride until there was only a rump of 50 members left, who then duly voted that the king be put on trial. Not a single English lawyer was prepared to draw up a charge sheet against the king. Eventually, it was provided by a Dutch Jew, Isaac Dorislaus. The king was forced to participate in a show trial in a high court of justice in which 2/3 of its members were levelers from the army. Charles refused to plead, but was found guilty and executed on the 30th of January, 1649. As the procession approached the scaffold, large numbers of the crowd shouted, "God save the king!" After the deed had been done, there was an enormous groan of anguish. Second Jewish migration. From the 7th to the 18th of December, 1655, Cromwell, who was called the Protector, held a conference in Whitehall, London, in order to obtain approval for the large-scale immigration of Jews. In spite of the conference being packed with Cromwell's supporters, the overwhelming consensus of the delegates, who were mainly priests, lawyers, and merchants, was that the Jews should not be permitted to enter England. In October 16...
And just to be clear, this chapter 2 is called The Hidden Origins of the Bank of England. So if you're listening to all this and trying to figure out what all this is, talk about Jewish people being admitted in or out. If you listen to yesterday's show, a lot was talked about how Jewish were expunged out of many countries because of the damage in the leadership of those countries was being done. And so this was how they fixed their central banking problems in the past. This is the buildup of the mother bank, the Bank of England, the one that essentially is ruling over us today.
1656, the first Jews were surreptitiously allowed to land freely in England, in spite of strong protests having been lodged by the subcommittee of the Council of State, who declared that these Jews would be a grave menace to the state and the Christian religion. The merchants, without exception, spoke against the admission of the Jews. They declared that the proposed immigrants would be morally harmful to the state and that their admission would enrich foreigners at the expense of the English. Cromwell died on the 3rd of September 1658 and was succeeded by his son, Richard, who ruled for 9 months. Charles I's son, Charles II, 1660 to 1685, succeeded his executed father. Although he would be the last English monarch to issue money, banknotes, in his own right, he made 2 fatal errors of governance. On the 1st of August 1663, he passed the euphemistically sounding Act for the Encouragement of Trade, which enabled the export of all foreign coins or bullion or gold or silver, free of interdict, regulation, or duties of any kind. During the debate on the bill, the Earl of Anglesey presciently observed that it is dangerous to the peace of the kingdom when it shall be in the power of half a dozen or half a score of rich, discontented, or factious persons to make a bank and accumulation of our own coin and bullion beyond the seas and leave us in want of money when it shall not, no longer, be in the king's power to prevent it. 3 years later, by means of an Act for the Encouragement of Coinage, he permitted private persons, i.e. bankers and goldsmiths, to mince the coins of the realm at the royal mint and thereby acquire the considerable benefits of the seigniorage, the difference between the face value of coins and their production costs, income for their own private account. Furthermore, it enabled them to increase or diminish the supply of money in circulation and to raise or lower prices at will to the great detriment of the general population. His brother, James II, 1685 to 1688, reign only lasted 3 years. He was a victim of unscrupulous pamphleteering and propaganda, which emanated mainly from Holland. A military expedition undertaken by Prince William of Orange eventually dethroned him. Although James's army was numerically superior, he was discouraged from attacking after John Churchill, 1st Duke of Marlborough, suddenly deserted him. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, Churchill subsequently received an annual stipend of £6,000 for the Dutch Jew Solomon de Medina in payment for his treasonous conduct. These vast sums of blood money enabled Churchill to proceed with the construction of Blenheim Palace, which was completed at his death in 1722. William of Orange's military campaign, like that of the other William the Conqueror in 1066, was financed by Jewish bankers. In return for their support, William III, 1689 to 1702, would surrender the royal prerogative of issuing England's money free of debt and interest to a consortium known as the Governor and Company of the Bank of England. A. N. Field, in All These Things, summarizes these epical events known as the Glorious Revolution of 1688, but which was in effect the infamous revolution, as follows. 33 years after Cromwell had let the Jews into Britain, a Dutch prince arrived from Amsterdam surrounded by a whole swarm of Jews from that financial center. Driving his royal father-in-law, James II, out of the kingdom, he graciously consented to ascend the throne of Britain. A very natural result following on this event was the inauguration of the national debt by the establishment 6 years later of the Bank of England for the purpose of lending money to the crown. Britain had paid her way as she went until the Jews arrived. The pawnshop was then opened, and the resulting situation in which the nation finds itself today could not be better described than in the words put by Shakespeare with prophetic vision in the mouth of the dying John of Gaunt. This land of such dear souls, this dear, dear land, dear for her reputation through the world, is now leased out, I die pronouncing it, like to a tenement or pelting farm. England, bound in with the triumphant sea, whose rocky shore beats back the envious siege of watery Neptune, is now bound in with shame, with inky blots and rotten parchment bonds. That England, that was wont to conquer others, hath made a shameful conquest of itself. Richard II, Act 2, Scene 1. The history of the second Jewish settlement in Britain is one long trail of parchment bonds shackling the nation in debt. Every step of the ascent of the Jew in the nation's affairs has been marked by the increase and multiplication of debt. Establishment of the Bank of England. The need for a privately owned central bank was fronted by a retired pirate, William Paterson, when he wrote a pamphlet in 1693 entitled A Brief Account of the Intended Bank of England. He would later boast that this bank hath the benefit of interest on all moneys which it creates out of nothing. On Thursday, the 21st of June 1694, subscription lists for the bank, which had a capital of £1.2 million, were opened. By the following Monday, this amount had been fully subscribed. The ostensible purpose of the bank was to lend King William unlimited sums at 8% per annum to enable the prosecution of war, and in particular, the conflict against Louis XIV of France, whose country was not on the usury system. The bank would thus receive from the Crown interest of £100,000 per annum, the additional £4,000 being an administrative fee. The bank also acquired the right to issue £1.2 million in banknotes without any gold cover. Prior to its listing, the bylaws of the bank were carefully scrutinized by Sergeant-at-Law Cresswell-Levins in order to ensure that the bank complied with its hidden purpose, viz., to fleece the English people in perpetuity by allowing the creation of the nation's money and means of exchange out of nothing at interest. All of this fake money was to be accompanied by compounding interest. Levins was a crypto-Jew, or Marrano, who practiced as an advocate and later served as a judge. There was much opposition to the establishment of the bank. Foremost were the goldsmiths and moneylenders, who correctly foresaw that it would bring an end to their usurious racket of fractional reserve banking based on their gold receipts. Landowners and country gentry feared an escalation in interest rates, as the bank would control the nation's money supply. There were allegations that the bank would favor certain merchants with low rates of interest. The biggest fear was that the bank would grow too powerful and would become the keystone of the commercial world. Unfortunately, this is exactly what happened, as the Bank of England became the model on which all subsequent central banks were replicated. At that time, the House of Commons had 514 members consisting of 243 Tories, 241 Whigs, and 28 members whose allegiance was unknown. About two-thirds of the members were country gentlemen, and it is believed that of the 514 members, approximately 20% were illiterate. The bill was debated in July 1694, the high point in summer, when most of the rural members were engaged in summer pursuits and the harvesting of their crops. On that fateful Friday, the 27th of July 1694, when the Charter of Incorporation was granted, only 42 members were present, all of them Whigs, as the Tories opposed the bill, who all voted in favor of it. This begs the question as to what a quorum consisted of in those days. The title of the bill made no mention of the proposed Bank of England, which is only described, or one might say, secreted, two-thirds down in the unintelligible verbiage, to the layman that is, of the bill. The opening sentence of the bill reads as follows: William and Mary, by the grace of God, King and Queen of England, Scotland, France, and Ireland, defenders of the faith, etc., to all for whom these presents shall come greeting. The third sentence, which contains 242 words, starts, Whereas in and by a certain act lately made in Parliament, entitled an act for granting to their Majesties several rates and duties upon tonnage of ships and vessels, and upon beer, ale, and other liquors, for securing certain recompenses and advantages in the said act mentioned, to such persons as shall voluntarily advance the sum of £1,500,000 toward carrying on the war with France, it is amongst other things enacted. The gist of the final two-thirds of the bill details the necessity to levy a complicated array of new rates, duties, and taxes on ships, beer, ale, and other liquors. The true purpose of these taxes was that they were needed in order to fund the interest on all future government loans. Shortly thereafter, further taxes were introduced, including a land tax, paper tax, poll tax, salt tax, stamp tax, and window tax, which replaced the hearth or chimney tax. Other taxes initiated were a tax on peddlers, a tax on hackney coaches, a tax on births, marriages, and deaths, and lastly, a tax on bachelors. However, the most punitive tax introduced was an income tax, levied at a rate of 20%. It was applied not only to companies, but laborers too. War and debt slavery in perpetuity. Henceforth, a pattern would emerge where unnecessary wars would be embarked upon which simultaneously increased the national debt and the profits of the usurers. Significantly, most of these wars were started against countries that had implemented interest-free state banking systems, as was the case in the North American colonies and France under Napoleon. This pattern of attacking and enforcing the bankers' system of usury had been deployed widely in the modern era and includes the defeats of Imperial Russia in World War I, Germany, Italy, and Japan in World War II, and most recently, Libya in 2011. These were all countries which had state banking systems, which distributed the wealth of their respective nations on an equitable basis and provided their populations with a standard of living far superior to that of their rivals and contemporaries. Within 2 years of its establishment in 1696, the Bank of England had £1.75 million worth of banknotes circulating with a gold reserve of only 2%, or £36,000. On the 1st of May 1707, the union between Scotland and England was established, motivated in no small way by the necessity to seize control of the Royal Mint in Edinburgh, which took place in 1709. In 1720, after the conclusion of the War of the Spanish Succession, 1701 to 1714, the national debt had risen to £30 million, with the war itself having cost £50 million. After the American War of Independence, 1775 to 1783, which had been fought after the colonists had been forced to replace their debt and largely interest-free colonial scrip with English money and had resulted in 50% unemployment, the national debt soared to £176 million. According to Sir John Harold Clapham, who wrote The Bank of England, A History 1694 to 1914 in 1944, Solomon de Medina, and two de Costas, Fonseca, Henriquez, Mendez, Nunez, Rodriguez, Salvador, and Tejera de Matos, who were all Sephardic Jews, had acquired the majority of the bank's shares by 1722. In 1786, Prime Minister William Pitt the Younger tried to abolish the national debt with a sinking fund which generated interest of £1 million per annum to repay the debt. This scheme was soon abandoned because of the enormous increase in loans incurred to finance the war against Napoleon. In 1797, in order to pay for the burgeoning interest burden, a system of graduated income tax had to be introduced, which by 1815 was yielding £70 million per annum. The war against France lasted from 1792 until 1815. Among the principal objectives of this pointless bloodletting was to destroy Napoleon's debt and interest-free system of finance. See Chapter 3. During this period, England also waged a war against the United States from 1812 until 1814. This war, as was the case with the war against France, was instigated by England at the behest of banker Mayer Amschel Rothschild, real name Bauer, after the United States Congress refused to renew the charter of the Rothschild-controlled Bank of the United States, which had been the Central Bank of America from 1791 until 1811. Mayer Amschel Rothschild is famously credited with having said, "Give me control of the economics of a country, and I care not who makes her laws. The few who understand the system will either be so interested from its profits or so dependent on its favors that there will be no opposition from that class."
I will redo that quote from Amschel Rothschild, and we'll finish up with part 2 of this. And part 3 is Napoleon and the Bank of France. We'll get to that in the next segment. Patriot Radio News Hour. I'm your host, Jason. Joe Jaquin's on vacation, so I'm taking over, and I'm playing long content here of the A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind by Stephen Mitford Goodson. We're going to finish with part 2 and then start part 3, which is about Napoleon. But really quick, if you've been listening, you just came in late, you're listening to this content, we do have a gold and silver special today. Gold is still moving up. Let me take another quick look at the price, see if it's still moving. Yeah, gold just wants to keep moving, and silver it just keeps inching up. I don't know what it is. I'm on the air yesterday and today. It just wants to inch up on the hours I'm on. So silver's now up 64 cents. It's pushed past that 31.20. It's at 31.34. Gold is pushed past 24.61. So the specials that I set up this morning before I got in the air is getting literally better by the minute. So tomorrow, I don't know what the special will be, but 1/10 ounce gold Eagles are $300 today. 800-951-0592. Call us over there at the Arizona office. 1/10 ounce gold Eagles for $300. And we have rolls of silver Eagles, 20 ounces of coins, 20 coins in the roll, $760. You simply call 800-951-0592 and start stacking. If anything about this election coming up and the news from the weekend and everything we've been talking about for years and years, but especially the months of and years of inflation and since COVID leading up to this year, you should be fattening up your stack of coins as rapidly as possible. You do that with us, your gold and silver dealer, by calling 800-951-0592. Let's continue on. When we were hitting the break when we had Amschel Rothschild's, one of his famous quotes about what they really care about, and let's continue on.
Mayer Amschel Rothschild is famously credited with having said, "Give me control of the economics of a country, and I care not who makes her laws. The few who understand the system will either be so interested from its profits or so dependent on its favors that there will be no opposition from that class." British Prime Minister Spencer Perceval, 1809 to 1812, tried to stop this completely futile war, but was assassinated on the 11th of May 1812 in the lobby of the House of Commons by John Bellingham.
You'll notice a pattern as you listen to this information day after day, that people that are in opposition of this system tend to disappear or are essentially they're killed.
Bellingham, a political radical who had been set up by Rothschild. By 1815, the national debt had ballooned to £885 million. This completely unnecessary war resulted in approximately 3 million military personnel and at least 1 million civilians losing their lives. In order to destroy Napoleon State Bank, it cost the deluded British public a staggering £831 million, of which over £2.5 billion were still outstanding in 1914. The principal of £504 million had over the intervening period increased fivefold as a result of the compounding effect of interest. An astute agrarian and parliamentarian, William Cobbett, 1763 to 1835, at that time perceived what was afoot and wrote as follows: "I set to read the Act of Parliament by which the Bank of England was created. The investors knew what they were about. Their design was to mortgage by degrees the whole country, lands, houses, property, labor. The scheme had produced what the world never saw before: starvation in the midst of abundance. In 1800, a member of Parliament, Sir William Pulteney, proposed the formation of a national bank after having made vigorous attacks against the bank. In 1824, another member of Parliament, David Ricardo, submitted a detailed plan to convert the Bank of England into a national bank. Both attempts failed. The affairs of the Bank of England remained secret, and it was not until 1833, 139 years later, that a sanitized version of its accounts were presented to Parliament by means of the Act of 1833. At the start of World War I in 1914, the national debt stood at £650 million. On March 31, 1919, it had increased to £7.434 billion, of which £3 billion is still outstanding after 95 years at an interest rate of 3.5% per annum. In the 1919 budget, 40% of expenditure was allocated to the payment of interest. In World War II, the national debt rose by almost 300%, from £7.1 billion in 1939 to £20.1 billion in 1945. As of March 2017, it stands at over £1.8 trillion. However, if one includes all liabilities, including state and public pensions, it exceeds £5 trillion. Nationalization. On the 14th of February 1946, the Labour government nationalized the Bank of England. The shareholders received treasury notes to the value of £11,015,100, which were redeemable after 20 years. This nationalization, which supposedly placed the bank under public control, did not introduce any change to the privately run system of fractional reserve banking and was undertaken purely for propaganda purposes as part of the Labour Party's nationalization program of certain financial and industrial concerns. On the 6th of April 1974, the Bank of England established the Bank of England Nominees Limited, company registration number 1307478, a wholly owned subsidiary, with private shareholders holding its 100 £1 shares, of which 50% were sold. There is a suspicion that this rearrangement of the bank's affairs represents a reverse takeover of it by private shareholders. In view of the fact that certain aspects of the Bank of England's operations are protected by its Royal Charter, Section 27(9) of the Companies Act of 1976, and the Official Secrets Act of 1989, and are therefore not subject to public and parliamentary scrutiny, there may well be substance to this allegation.
That's the end of part 2. I'm going to click over to part 3.
A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind, by Stephen Mitford Goodson. Chapter 3. Napoleon and the Banque de France. The deadly facts herein revealed lead me to wonder that this monster, interest, has not devoured the whole human race. Napoleon Bonaparte, on being shown an interest table. France under the Bourbons. When the Bank of England was established in 1694, one of its principal aims was to provide sufficient finance so that England could prosecute its war against France. At that time, France was the premier world power both in terms of maritime forces and territorial possessions. 4 years previously, at the Battle of Beachy Head, near Eastbourne, England, the French Navy defeated the Anglo-Dutch fleet comprehensively, when it sank 12 ships, while a further 20 ships were exploded by their English crews. Since the 7th of June 1654, France had been ruled by its most glorious monarch, King Louis XIV, the Sun King. Louis was well versed in the wiles of the bankers. When he discovered that his superintendent of finances, Nicolas Fouquet, was a representative of what we term today the money power, and received irrefutable evidence that he had long been betraying the trust reposed in him by mishandling the state finances and by monstrous corruption, he had him arrested. Fouquet was put on trial and sentenced to complete isolation for the rest of his life in the inaccessible fortress of Pinerol. The War of Spanish Succession, 1702 to 1714, was the largest military conflict since the Crusades. It was fought after Louis declared his intention to place his grandson, Philip, Duke of Anjou, on the Spanish throne. This attempt, if successful, would have created a vast Franco-Spanish empire and posed a direct threat to the Bank of England and its proxy, the government of Great Britain. With the ability to create money out of nothing, the English were able to build a large fleet and buy the loyalty of France's enemies by bankrolling them. Louis held out for 9 years until his heirs suddenly started to die in unnatural circumstances. On the 13th of April 1711, his heir Louis, le Grand Dauphin, died allegedly of smallpox, even though he had the disease when he was a small child. On the 12th of
Talk a little bit more about the strange deaths of the French monarchy that had no central bank ruling over it. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. The Patriot Radio News Hour. Once more, I'm going to just keep telling you guys, we got 10th-ounce gold eagles for $300. And we also have full rolls of silver eagles, 20-ounce with a silver amount of silver, $760. Today's price. You might as well just keep on doing the check, and gold just keeps creeping up as I've been on the air today. Yeah, it's still doing. It's slowing down a little bit. Gold up $41.50. It's $2,464. It's gone up a little bit since the last segment, so it's just we'll see what it does the rest of the day. You guys have to keep a watch on it. Silver's up 70 cents, now up to $31.40, and the specials that I put together this morning are becoming to be better and better and better for you, the listener and the buyer, and less. It's going to be less fortunate for the Patriot Trading Group because we have to take the orders and then lock in the price. But just as a reminder, yeah, when you guys call in and buy any of our specials, any of our coins, you are locked into that price. When the product ships and you pick it up, whether gold has gone up or gone down, it's a gentleman's agreement. You pay the price, and with gold and silver making this upward movement. You buy the gold and silver, we'll say it ships late this week. I call you in for a meeting next week. You pick up then, and if gold's up $150 and silver's up $2 an ounce, you have been locked into that price. So always good if you keep seeing the upward movement that we've had since Thursday, and we've been above $2,400 an ounce on gold, for example, since Thursday. It looks like it's getting comfortable here. May want to buy sooner than later. So the number to call to buy gold and silver is 800-951-0592. Let's continue on talking about the Bank of France. Who was Napoleon? What was Napoleon really trying to do? Well, he was suspicious of central banks, and that's what those wars in Europe were all about.
English were able to build a large fleet and buy the loyalty of France's enemies by bankrolling them. Louis held out for 9 years until his heirs suddenly started to die in unnatural circumstances. On the 13th of April 1711, his heir Louis, le Grand Dauphin, died allegedly of smallpox, even though he had the disease when he was a small child. On the 12th of February 1712, the wife of his grandson, the Duke of Burgundy, died of a fever. A few days later, her husband was covered in spots, and he died on the 18th of February 1712 of unknown causes. A few weeks later, the king's 2 great-grandsons fell ill with scarlet fever. The 5-year-old Duke of Brittany died on the 18th of March 1712. The 3-year-old brother, the Duke of Anjou, survived, miraculously, after the king ordered his isolation and treatment with an antidote. As a result of these tragedies, the king was persuaded to cease hostilities and commence negotiations. At Utrecht, a treaty was signed in March and April 1713, which allowed France to retain largely its pre-war boundaries. Thereafter, the heirs to the French throne stopped dying, although this did not prevent the other grandson of Louis, the Duke of Berry, who was the regent of the future Louis XV, dying in an unusual riding accident. A broken man, the Sun King died of natural causes on the 1st of September, 1715. The ability of the English to command vast sums of money had not gone unnoticed by the French, who realized that the war had not been won because of a deficiency in financial credit. On the 1st of May, 1716, a Scotsman, John Law, received a patent to open a private bank, the Banque Générale, which was patterned on the Bank of England and which was entitled to issue banknotes and exchange them for gold. The regent of Louis XV, Philippe II, Duke of Orleans, realized that this bank could provide government with a means of financing its expenditures, and in 1718, France's first central bank came into existence and was renamed the Banque Royale. The adoption of the Bank of England paradigm of creating money ex nihilo soon enabled the French economy to recover and flourish. However, this period of prosperity was of short duration. In January 1720, the French government received a record-breaking loan of 100 million livres. The following month, news spread suddenly that the bank was experiencing difficulty in exchanging its banknotes for gold coins, and an atrocious panic ensued. The source of these rumors is not clear, but the most likely suspect would have been the Bank of England, which wished to destroy its dangerous rival. Various attempts were made to shore up the Banque Royale. A decree of the 11th of March 1720 banned the use of coins from the 1st of May onwards. When this measure failed to staunch the impending catastrophe, a decree was announced on the 22nd of May 1720 which reduced the value of the banknotes by 50%. A third decree of the 10th of October 1720 stated that on the 1st of November, banknotes would no longer be used and that they were to be exchanged for state bonds with a further reduction of 50% in their value. In November 1720, the Banque Royale declared itself bankrupt, and its founder and controller general of finances, John Law, fled the country the following month. For the Bank of England and its Jewish stockholders, the demise of the Banque Royale was an unmitigated triumph. Napoleon, the monetary reformer. Napoleon, who was Emperor of France from 1804 to 1815, was very mindful of the fact that money always remains in hiding and only acts through agents, who are often unaware of the aims that they are pursuing. He realized that international money stood behind every foreign enemy, every monarch, and every political party, including the Jacobins, stating on one occasion that the hand that gives is above the hand that takes. Money has no motherland. Financiers are without patriotism and without decency. Their sole object is gain. He had very clear ideas as to how he wished the French economy to be run. He defined his system as being for the application of the resources of government, including finances, for the benefit and use of his people for the greater glory of God. His system was for the maintenance of spiritual as against material values, the nation as against political parties, patriotism as against greed, loyalty as against fear. The bedrock of the economy was to be agriculture, for that is the soul of the people, the foundations of the kingdom. Next in importance was industry, which ministers to the comfort and happiness of the population. A poor third came foreign trade, which only consists of the surplus of agriculture and industry. In his opinion, foreign trade ought to be the servant of agriculture and home industry. These last ought never to be subordinated to foreign trade. Napoleon's ultimate objective was to ensure not only financial independence, but self-sufficiency in the production of goods for domestic consumption. Napoleon would not allow loans to be employed for current expenditure, whether civil or military, under any circumstances. On the subject of debt, he had this to say: "One has only to consider what loans can lead to in order to realize their danger. Therefore, I would never have anything..."
We'll get to Napoleon's quote and get a few more minutes of this on the other side. Stay with us. We'll finish this thing up on the other side. A History of Central Banking and the Enslavement of Mankind by Stephen Mitford Goodson. This is what I've been playing yesterday and today. I'll be playing through the week. If you're wondering what this is that you're listening to, one last time for today, 1 10th-ounce gold eagles are $300 today, and rolls of silver eagles are $760. As gold and silver just keeps moving upward throughout this morning. The number to call is 800-951-0592. Let's get Napoleon's quote in. I was going to try to get this part done today, but pitching gold and silver is this is how we pay the bills, and it's also how you guys preserve your wealth. So here we go.
Has only to consider what loans can lead to in order to realize their danger. Therefore, I would never have anything to do with them and have always striven against them.
This is a Napoleon quote. I'm going to back it to the beginning of it so you guys can hear it.
Has only to consider what loans can lead to in order to realize their danger. Therefore, I would never have anything to do with them and have always striven against them. At one time, people asserted that I did not issue loans because I possessed no credit and could find nobody who would lend me anything. That is quite false. That surely implies a very scanty knowledge of human nature and an ignorance of stock exchange methods if people imagine that I could find no one ready to lend. It was not part of my system. The State Bank of the French Empire. Napoleon's first act on assuming power as First Consul on the 9th of November 1799 was to establish the Banque de France on the 18th of January 1800 as a joint stock company, which commenced operations on the 20th of February of that year. This bank replaced the 15, mainly Jewish, private banking houses which had been deeply involved in the events leading up to the Jewish Revolution against the French people, commonly, but incorrectly, known as the French Revolution from 1789 to 1799. These banks had increased the national debt to £170 million and had charged rapacious rates of interest on loans to the French crown, to the extent that, prior to 1789, it was allocating over 50% of its budget expenditure to interest. The bank was set up with a share capital of 30 million francs, divided into 30,000 shares of 1,000 francs each, of which a portion was subscribed by Napoleon, his family, and members of his entourage. The dividend of the shareholders was initially limited to 6% per annum, but was increased in 1806 to 2/3 of the bank's profits. with the remaining one-third being allocated to the bank's reserves. The 200 largest shareholders elected 15 regents, or directors, who sat on the General Council administering the bank, and 3 censors, or inspectors, who supervised management of the bank. The General Council, in turn, elected a central committee consisting of 3 members, one of whom was chairman. Napoleon made himself president of the bank, declaring that the bank does not belong to the shareholders only. It also belongs to the state, since the state has entrusted to it the privilege of issuing money. I wish the bank to be in sufficient measure in the hands of the state, but not too much so. On the 14th of April, 1803, by means of an act of Parliament, Napoleon abolished the right of 2 rival banks, the Caisse des Comptes de Commerce and the Comptoir Commercial, to issue banknotes. As he remarked at that time, "Have you not told me that, in order to preserve credit, it is a general practice that artificial money, like that of the Bank of France, shall issue from only one source? I adopt that idea. A single bank can be more easily watched than several concerns, both by the government and the public. With a view to emergencies, I cannot see any virtue in competition of this kind."
That'll pretty much do it for today. I'll try to finish up the part with Napoleon and what it was his eventual woes with the central banking cartel of the world at the time. And as we continue on through the week, you'll get we'll move further up in history, and it's like a broken record that just keeps on giving you bad news over and over and over again. That'll do it today. If you want to switch over, the half-empty cup of Joe, you may enjoy it. We've got Steve Stars coming on. We may be interested talking a little bit about our media and how controlled that is. And go to 1360khc.com if you want to switch over and live stream it in. So we'll see you tomorrow. Buy that gold and silver.